Okay, so with that, I'm going to bring in Sharon Spooler, who is with Chief Outsiders. She's been there for a number of years, that you may have seen from her LinkedIn profile. And she's going to be talking with us this morning about the rise of the fractional C-suite. So Sharon, good morning, welcome, and I'll let you introduce yourself and your role with Chief Outsiders.
Good morning, Ken. Good morning, everyone. I see some familiar names and faces in the room. It's nice to see you all again, and also nice to virtually meet some new faces in the room today. Thanks for asking me to join you all in your SMLA meeting. I think it's going to be, it looks like a really fun group. My role at Chief Outsiders, I'm an area managing partner covering San Diego, Orange County, and Phoenix regions for the organization. Chief Outsiders, for those of you who haven't heard of us, we are a national fractional chief marketing officer organization. We've been in business for 12 years. We have 80 fractional CMOs based in 35 markets around the United States. And we've worked with about 1,200 companies in our organization's history. And we're on the leadership team now of about 150 companies as we speak today.
It's quite sizable. And Sharon, remind me again, is there a particular region where you're more concentrated than others? You said you're 80 folks across the country. Any particular regions?
I think we follow the population, right? So California, Texas, the Northeast, Chicago area. It depends. Each region has its own kind of verticals that seem to appear more frequently than others. But yeah, we generally follow the U.S. population in terms of where we're based.
Okay, great. And is there a typical kind of company size that you work with, or a scenario that's more likely than others where companies decide to bring you in?
Yes. So I guess I'll call it our target, or our most common size, is somewhere between 10 million and 200 million in revenue. Usually the situation is they're growing or not growing as quickly as they'd like. And they're looking for a way to unlock their growth engine. And the most common model with which companies work with us is as their fractional CMO. So that means some percentage of our time spent on their business. Most of the organizations that size don't need someone full-time in a CMO seat. So we may be there, 1, 2, 3 days a week. And, that fluctuates over time. It could be, 2 days a week initially, and then tailors off to a day or even half a day a week as we've, sort of established the strategy and the go-to-market plan. And then it's time to execute. So, yeah, I think the most common is as a fractional CMO. We also do projects. So if there's something discrete, and we coach and advise CMOs and CEOs. And that's another offering that, either a really small company or a really large company may take us up on. They may actually have a full-time CMO in this seat, and we come alongside them and either execute a special project because they don't have the bandwidth for it, or perhaps the expertise in having done it before. It's a high stakes critical endeavor, like a launch of a new solution or a new market, or they have a new to role CMO. And we've all seen the stats, right? The average CMO tenure is something like 20 to 30 months, or it changes. Ken, you probably know that better than I do.
No, you're right. Yeah, it's around 30 to 36 months, depending upon the size of the company. Yeah, it can be tough, right? Because whenever a new CEO comes in, she or he always has an idea of how they want to go to market and their strategy, and so they come in, and the current incumbent CMO probably didn't have a chance to even see their own plan out with the last CEO. And so it's kind of a constant churn, if you will, in a lot of places. A little bit less so with private companies, but still can be an issue.
Yes, and so the advisory coaching offering is built for organizations that are either promoting someone new to role to the CMO seat, or hiring in from the outside to help them get a fast start, engage quickly, and be successful in the role by having someone there to guide them that's been there and done it before and kind of knows the milestones that need to be hit within certain periods of time.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, as Sharon and I have been talking quite a bit over the last 6 months or so, but even more so over the last couple of weeks, we actually had a couple of chances to collaborate. And I was literally on a call yesterday with the CEO, head of sales and marketing, and the fractional CMO, Dawn, from Chief Outsiders for this organization. The company's based here in Carlsbad. Dawn herself actually is back in Virginia. And it was great to have kind of see that experience, kind of firsthand. Dawn had been on board for about a year or so, and she literally came in to build out the strategy and to kind of set the stage for them to eventually hire a direct hire person to be on board there, which is now, how Turning Point, how we're getting involved. But it was great because her background was perfect for them. The CEO, really couldn't stop raving about what a great job that she did. So that was a good example of how that fit, if you will, that fractional fit, really is very impactful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a great use case of how our two organizations can work together because, really at the end of the day, often in organizations, who you need now isn't always who you're going to need in 6 months or 2 years or 3 years, depending on the inflection of where your organization is in its product life cycle or in its organizational maturity. Building an organization is like building a pizza, right? You got to kind of build out the different functions over time. And there might become a time where marketing becomes mission critical for the organization. And there isn't time or, there isn't really the understanding in the organization for what kind of full-time person they need. And so bringing someone in to fill the seat to get the work done that's needed right now, and then to help find that long-term hire is a great way to sort of keep going when you don't have time to stop on an initiative.
Right. No, that's a great point. And as you said earlier, too, so many things on the marketing side are definitely time critical. When all the searches that we're doing these days on the marketing side, there's not a single one where the CEO is not saying, I need somebody who's really good with lead generation, demand gen. And I would say, 3 years ago, that wasn't the case. That was maybe one of, the top 5 skills or kind of functions for the person coming in. But these days, across the board, it's number one. Lead generation, and especially because since COVID hit, and probably many of you can attest to this and have similar experiences, so many companies were relying so heavily on sponsorships, right? And going to events and going to large trade shows like CES, and that's where a lot of the leads came from. In fact, this company I was referring to that I talked to yesterday, I asked that very question. They said they had 90% reliance on trade shows and on networking events. That's where the vast majority of their leads were coming from. And as we all know, over the last year, that source, if you will, right, has completely gone away. It's just disappeared. And so a lot of companies are really having to rethink, what is our lead generation strategy going to be? Even when events do come back next year at some point, they don't want to have such an overly, kind of over reliance on just the trade show and event piece. Are you seeing those trends with your clients also, Sharon?
Yes, I think welcome to the lasting impacts of the pandemic. I think that's what you just articulated, right? Even if events come back this year or next, we don't know if they're going to fill giant halls of people shaking hands with booths, 8 to 10 feet apart and huge networking hours. The main 2 reasons people attend events is the networking is usually primary, and the secondary one is for the information. Well, this last year, people have found you can network virtually. It's maybe not as fun, and so some of it will come back to face-to-face. And the same goes for just dispensing information, getting new information about trends in your market or industry. You can do that also virtually, albeit much better in bite-sized pizzas on webinars versus full-day Zoomathons, if you will. But I think those trends are here to stay in terms of needing a more balanced demand generation approach between digital and face-to-face.
Yeah, definitely. A question from Steve, who comes out of the food space. And it's a good question because I think it speaks to kind of your role and also how you interact with the rest of the folks within your clients. Are you seeing, other uses of fractional, executives, if you will? Do you come into clients where there's in Steve's question, he asked about, fractional chief commercial officers, or it could be, head of sales, or even the CEO or CFO for that matter could be fractional. Are you seeing some of that out there?
Yes. definitely. I think this concept of fractional is really gaining some momentum for the same reasons I mentioned. Who you need now may not be who you need in 6 or 12 or 18 months. And it's a great way to keep going when you can't afford to stop. One use case, last year I worked with an IT services company. We were also pivoting from a lot of leads via conferences and trade shows to a digital approach. We ended up through some really good input from our engineering team. We tapped some great opportunities for demand generation. And so the company went from maybe 5 to 10 leads a month from digital to, now they're at about 120 a month from digital. And that inflection point happened in June, July of last year. So in that case, we had to bring on a fractional head of sales from our partner organization. We work a lot with sales acceleration. I see Enrico's here today. Hi, Enrico. And from someone from sales acceleration, because we didn't have the sales structure in that organization to handle not only the volume of leads, but also the volume of leads, as well as kind of the digital sales process. Like, we needed someone to come in to help build out an SDR, BDR function, qualifying function, and then find the right sort of AE structure and account management structure for the organization. And it's going really well. Like, we're now, seeing conversions go up in the funnel from lead to closed won. That same company uses a fractional CFO as well. They're about 15 million in revenue right now. They were 10 when I started working with them on an annualized basis. And so they're working with a fractional CFO, and they're also an EOS company. And I talked to Brian Wirtz in our breakout session, who is doing some work in that EOS space as an integrator. And I'm starting to see an increase in fractional integrator demand, which is essentially like a COO function, but sort of running that specific EOS model. So those are the areas that I've seen an increase, and certainly have worked with lots of fractional resources and other functions as well. But those are the ones that I see sort of this increasing trend recently.
Interesting. Yeah. And like I said, more often, this is, kind of, we've seen this trend more often now than we ever have before. But as we're going into new clients to help them with direct hire, same kind of thing. There's invariably somebody there that's there on a fractional basis. It could be, a wide variety. So one of the questions I have for you is how do you kind of bridge that gap, right? How do you establish the rapport, establish the communication, and really kind of get on the same page with when your team is in there on a finite timeline, the person that you're interacting with is also there on a finite timeline, and everybody's timelines could be very different. So how do you kind of coalesce, if you will, the strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think first of all, for a lot of organizations, it can be refreshing and sometimes also unsettling to have an outside point of view about their challenges and opportunities in the form of growth. So I think really critical for at least the marketing function is to build a strong relationship, not just with the CEO, but really the head of sales is very important, as we just talked about. And also the CFO function is important because marketing for a lot of organizations is the largest discretionary spend that a company has. Mm-hmm. Right? Think about that, right? You have to pay them. You have a product, you have to develop it. You have service, you need to service your customers. But marketing is a place that CEOs and CFOs can dial up and down the budget pretty easily and quickly. So if it's the largest form of discretionary spend in an organization's P&L, a CMO is like a chief investment officer. We need to decide where the investment should go, how much it needs to be, where it should go, and be able to articulate the return the company is getting for that investment, just like you would expect of your financial advisor. So those roles are really important to build a relationship quickly. In addition to, obviously any team or agencies or resources the organization is working with in the marketing department. And because we're outside, if you will, we're sort of outside inside. I love it when I get called a chief insider, by the way. That makes me feel good. It means I've done my job in terms of being part of the team. But because we're designed to go away, it also can remove some barriers. There's no politics, there's no bigger chessboard, there's no land grab, right? We're really there to get something done on a mission. And our sole goal and our sole measure of whether we're successful or not is the company growing? Are we making a difference? And so it can be really clean in terms of our relationship and our objective on that front. And I think that's really positive. And that's what I love, is that it's very results based in terms of how our performance is gauged.
No, that's a great comment. I agree with that completely. So one of the, I'm curious about, switching from the technical focus that you have going in there, whether it's you or other fractional folks also, moving over to the kind of cultural piece, right? Because, and I ask this question because, a lot of companies now are trying to figure out what is the culture they want to, cultivate, for lack of a better term, going forward post-COVID. It was all, pretty consistent and pretty well laid out pre-COVID. People knew kind of what kind of organization they were. Employees knew what they were getting into. But COVID has turned just everything in every organization completely on its head, right? And on the recruiting side, what we do, the biggest, I think, long-term impact, probably indefinite impact, is working remotely. So I guess two questions. A, how involved do you get as a fractional CMO with helping to set that tone and build that culture? And then the second question is, how do you do that when A, you're virtual, and B, you're there for a short time frame?
Yeah. I mean, I think the entire leadership team has a role in driving and determining the culture of an organization. And to the extent as a fractional CMO, we do see ourselves as part of that team. And so to the extent that we do have a role to play in helping drive, express the culture of the organization. Marketing has a clear role. I always say some of your social media posts for organizations, for example, let's get tactical, need to be culture based. Mm-hmm. Need to be talking about the fun Zoom hour you did, or some acknowledgement of an employee's 25th anniversary with the company, or the company's 10th anniversary of being in business. Like those sort of external communications really help, I think, Ken, and for you, hiring, recruiting, retaining employees, is to have a clear and demonstrable culture and feeling external to the organization as well as internal. So there's a role there for sure. How do you do that virtually? I mean, I think we're all still learning. I think some best practices that I've seen, one has been to make room for everything that happens when you're virtual. And I mean, oh man, I have some stories. So same client last year, the IT services company has a cat that just loves attention and absolutely loves to walk across the screen and turn its body at just the right angle. So the backside of the cat's facing the camera regularly. So we all acknowledge it, laugh about it, and say, well, you must not like that idea. Let's move on to the next one. But anything from cat photobombing to recently I was on the call with a CEO, and the door opens and there's his 4-year-old son completely photeless, naked, like, hi, I'm here, in the background during a pretty serious conversation. So, we have to have grace for and acknowledge that, all of us are people too, and our home lives and our work lives are blending, right? And I think also making room for that on calls. What we really miss, not being in the same building together, is that 5-minute conversation in the kitchen or in the hallway about how was your weekend. So leave room for that on your team calls. Check in at the beginning, It's okay if we spend 5 or 10 minutes of our marketing meeting to say, how was your weekend? And how'd your kid do in his baseball tournament? And how's your mom? Is she feeling better? Did anyone get to go anywhere over the summer for a fun vacation? Who bought an RV recently? Leave room for that. And then, lastly, some of the virtual tools like Slack, I found to be really helpful for maintaining culture. If there's a channel on Slack that's like random or fun pictures or, celebration, and people can contribute and connect when they have downtime or they need that sort of 5-minute mental break from the day-to-day work stuff. So those are just some things that I found. Oh, and also I wanted to mention the average employee is checking, I think it's something like 6 to 9 forms of communication on a daily basis. 6 to 9 forms. I mean, email, phone, text, Slack, Teams, their CRM, their marketing system, their product, I mean, whatever you have for customer service. So being really clear about the role each form of communication has in your organization can have a huge positive impact on morale and engagement, right? Only text me when it's critical. Don't just text me for that piece of paper you need in a week, right? What is mission critical? And then at the, think of it as a communication pyramid, right? What has to be real time and mission critical, what has to be real time and isn't urgent, and what is asynchronous, and be thinking about the type of communication that you're using in order to I don't know, engage someone in whatever that topic is. Is it really urgent?
That's a really good point. I think one of the things that we have seen and are still seeing out there as far as a big change is that, management leadership has had to really kind of rethink, if you will, the type of communication that they leverage, they utilize, but also the frequency, right? Because like you said, you don't have the ability, even when you used to have remote employees, pre-COVID that were spread throughout the country, you were seeing them, as a sales leader, marketing leader, you were seeing them on client sites or traveling out to them once a quarter on average. So you still had that face-to-face interaction. It's now been almost a year, and many of us haven't seen each other face-to-face for a full year, right? That's a big difference. And so, and even if whatever numbers you believe out there, anywhere from, it was from what I read, about 8% of companies had some kind of remote working platform or policy in place pre-COVID. Now, of course, it's upwards of about 55%. But even post-vaccine, the expectation is that it's going to still remain around 30 to 35%. So that's still a pretty big jump from where it was pre-COVID. So these new ways of managing and communicating and prioritizing are here to stay. It's not a short-term, kind of Band-Aid fix, if you will. It's going to be long-term. That's really important. So to that point, I think your usual engagement, Sharon, are about 6 to 9 months. Is that right, on average?
That's a good average, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious, so when you're deciding as an organization who to put into an organization as a fractional CMO, is personality fit and the cultural side, is that as important as a technical industry fit, or how do you decide how to make that match?
I think in a lot of ways it's more important.
Okay.
When we ask the CEO, they'll say, I want industry experience, and I want them to be local, and I want them to have, whatever knowledge about our products. The reality is a lot of companies already have product experts, whether they're B2B or B2C. Mm-hmm. So that's not really, I think, as important as people may think, or even industry experience, because, I've worked in, I don't know how many industries now, 5 or 6, 7. And what you learn is sometimes what one does really well, another can really benefit from. And so you can bring that lens to the table. And so in a lot of ways, Ken, and I'm going to assume this may be really true for what you do too, is chemistry is quite important. And you'll notice that, I'm a certified DISC partner with Wiley DISC. Why do I do that? What does that have to do with marketing? Nothing. It has everything to do with chemistry and communication. So I don't use it. I don't do any or OD or training on the HR side in companies, but not only to match a CMO to an opportunity, but also to help affect change within organizations. It's important to kind of see how the personality or the communication styles will match up.
No, I agree completely. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think back to the idea about the communication style and understanding kind of what's expected. And I'm sure when you're talking to your fractional CMOs to try to figure out who to put out there, you've got to spend some time to match that up and figure out, okay, so who likes to communicate this way, with this kind of a leader, who's used to this. Some leaders are very hard-nosed and just direct to the point. Some might say brash, right? There's got to be somebody that's not gonna be turned off by that. That's gonna have a thick skin. And other leaders, are a little bit more, kind of easygoing, down to earth, whatever the term might be. And so you've got to match that up as well. And it's the same thing for us also. Yeah. I want to chat a little bit something you mentioned a few minutes ago about lead conversion. and you're talking about that one IT service company going from whatever 5 or 10 to 100 plus leads, right? What are you seeing out there in terms of, I guess, kind of expectations, right, from CEOs and leaders about what that lead conversion ratio should be these days? And then what are you seeing? How does that map against the reality about what most lead conversion rates actually look like in real life?
Yeah. So, one thing you guys may not know, I'm actually not a trained marketer. I'm actually a trained data scientist. So my
Well,
undergrad degree is in
you have your degree in
civil engineering and operations research. So way back in the Stone Ages, right, when we didn't have something called AI or ML, we called it operations research. And so my degree is actually in like applied math, basically. So to me, the funnel and the investment return is really a math equation. If you're going to so the answer is, what should you expect for conversion? Well, the answer is, it depends on what you put in. So back to that investment return conversation. And I think that's an early point of alignment I mentioned between the CFO, the CEO, the head of sales, and marketing, is if we're going to spend X on marketing, how many leads do we need to get to, based on our current conversion rates, into sales qualified leads, into opportunities, into closed won deals, to feel good about that level of marketing investment. Now, there's of course a sales cycle, and not everything closes in year, and you have to take into account, is the company bootstrapped, or do they have an investment? All of those things go into it. But at the end of the day, it's getting alignment first on what is the expectation. That's, I think, the trick, because a lot of organizations will be measured just on leads, or not have that math formula kind of sorted out. And I think there's a real opportunity there to build alignment before you spend. And then there are initiatives that happen outside of that pure lead generation funnel, like creating a new website, or updating your messaging, or launching a new solution, that should affect your funnel and widen it if you do it well, right? So why do you build a new website? Well, maybe it's to widen your funnel a bit because the messaging is more clear, or you have stronger calls to action on pages, or what have you. So that's the way, and that's definitely a math way to look at it. So maybe, yeah, good.
And do you find that kind of resonates with CEOs, or are they just saying, I want more leads and we need to do a better job, right? And they really haven't done the homework, or they haven't reverse engineered that equation that you're talking about to realize, okay, if I want to close, I don't know, 5 deals every month, that means I need to have 10 proposals, which means I need to have 20 demos, kind of thing, and reverse engineer that. Do you find that people talk about what they want in the end result, but don't think about what it takes to get there?
Yeah, I feel like yes, and it's not because the organization doesn't know. It's the data sometimes, and the accountability is stored in multiple silos, right? It's stored in multiple silos. So I feel like the CFOs really know, sort of what's happening, for example, with revenue trends, or amount of revenue per customer, average lifetime value. Like they look at those stats. Sales absolutely looks at, what's our win rate, and, what's the average ARR, or average deal size. And they know even, how many calls we need to make in order to get that. And the marketing has all these metrics over here around engagement, social engagement, web engagement, conversion, time on site, and then ultimately leads, right? But they're all in silos. And so what I'm suggesting is, it's all out there. Just put it all in one spreadsheet and get together and figure out what it means.
Right.
And then you can align on, hey, this is what we can afford to spend in marketing, and therefore what we can expect to generate from that investment. And if you want to grow more than that, then the rest needs to come from prospecting, from your sales department.
And I'm curious back to the communication piece, and also what you just talked about too. When a new CMO goes in from chief outsiders, is there a regular kind of status update that's provided? Is it a weekly phone call? Is it daily? I mean, what's the interaction like when your CMOs first go in?
Yeah. So the benefit of doing this a lot of times in our company's history is we've certainly learned from our the things that went well and definitely learn from the things that didn't. And so I think a best practice that we've adopted, especially when there's a fractional engagement, is a weekly check-in on progress against the milestones that we set up either in the statement of work, or shortly thereafter. We will kind of get a little sharper with those as we're onboarding and learning more about the organization. We'll tighten up the work streams, and so we will report back weekly. And then there's also, in our firm, we have because we have this managing partner and area managing partner structure. So the managing partners and area managing partners will follow up also on a 30 and 90 and 180 days with the CEO and just check in, just in case there's anything going on that the CEO doesn't feel comfortable addressing or has some other questions. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes the chemistry isn't what we thought it would be, and we've had to make a change. And so we're very open and willing if that needs to happen. So we do have that sort of escalation, if you will, and check-in structure in place.
And are the CMOs that are being deployed, are they technically independent contractors, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a mix. I mean, everyone at Chief Outsiders is dedicated to Chief Outsiders. So we don't do, our CMOs are so our CMOs start out as associates. During that time, they're 1099, and then they can be doing some things outside. Often they're coming in from leaving their last role. Maybe there's some things happening there, or they've been doing consulting on their own, and they've decided, they want to join a firm. And so they have some lingering clients that they want to keep working with, of course, until it makes sense to roll off. And then after, hitting some milestones and us liking them and them liking us, because it's definitely a mutual thing, right? A year or 2 years in, people will make partner. And when they become partner, they're K1 partners. So it's a K1 structure, and still eat what you kill type of comp plan. So
interesting. Okay, great. It's good to hear kind of how that kind of traditional professional service structure, if you will, is in place for you also.
Yeah, like a law firm. I guess we stole it probably from a law firm type of way, right?
Well, it was the same with the very large global executive search firm, same kind of thing, same kind of a structure there as well. So let's kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about kind of just the whole digital world, right? So whether it's e-commerce, or whether it's in supply chain, or whether it's customers buying very differently, or contactless service, whatever it is, I put that all under kind of the digital world, because it's not a face-to-face kind of an interaction or transaction. What trends are you seeing out there? I know a lot of your clients are B2B, but you do have a mix. Most of the folks that are on the call today are B2B, but there's a few B2C folks here as well. What are you seeing as far as trends out there around digital transformation, digital marketing, leveraging? How do you decide whether you're on Facebook or whether you're on LinkedIn, right? Do you post on Twitter for lead generation? Does that even get anywhere? Do you go into one of the crazy breakout rooms in Reddit, right? Because you want to get your latest stock picks, whatever it might be. But on the digital side, what are you seeing out there in terms of those trends, now in the new year?
Right. There are a lot of questions in that question.
Yeah.
All right.
I guess the overarching question is, what are you seeing as far as digital trends? How about that?
Yeah, no, I love it. So, well, certainly, digital is happening, right? So if you're in a B2B marketing role, the chances that your marketing services to help your client's clients, right, digitally transform. So you have to be aware of that trend, right? Sort of just how you do messaging for whatever your clients' solutions or offerings are. So there is this sort of, faster, bigger, stronger push towards digital transformation that was caused by sort of how we all started working differently last year. So there's that dimension. There's another dimension though within marketing, and I think that the trends are, even in B2B, are to digitally transform your marketing efforts. So, I mean, if companies don't have a CRM, they should have a CRM. If they don't have a marketing automation platform attached to that CRM, that's probably time for that. And there's lots of good solutions out there. I'm a huge proponent of HubSpot because all that stuff comes shrink wrapped out of the box and integrated. and at a price point that is pretty good, and with a lot of professional services resources that can help both set it up and run it on an ongoing basis. But there's lots of ways, and a lot of companies love Salesforce or Pipedrive, and there's many ways to go after this. So I think in terms of digital trends in how marketing is run, that's a really important piece, because without that, and without, to implement a technology, you need to have a process, right? So you need to define, a company needs to define what is its marketing process, what is its sales process. Once it's put on a platform, it can be measured, and then we have metrics to know whether something is working or not. And I think that's like the first step in your digital trends, digital view of the world in marketing in these days. And that's true for B2B or B2C. The next set of questions is marketing digitally that I heard. So, Facebook, Reddit, LinkedIn, Twitter, where to go. That should be driven by the research that you're doing into your customer base, right? So, and if you have the platform to see where your business is not just coming from, and that's always been known as first in attribution, right? But some of these platforms can actually tell you how influential a digital channel is along the entire buying journey of your customer. So you can answer questions like, 80% of the deals I closed last year engaged with content on LinkedIn, but only 20% engaged with content on Facebook. Well, as a marketer, I'd say, LinkedIn's worth a little more to me than Facebook. Yeah. So again, it comes back to having the platform, and then both using the data you're collecting to understand what digital channels are driving the volume and also influencing the sales process the most. But then, in talking to your customers and closed won deals, what caused you to having marketing talk to your customers, your new wins, what caused you to look for a solution? How did you find us? Who did you talk to? What concerns did you have? How did you, get past those concerns before you bought with us? Did you read something on our site? Did you read it somewhere else? Did you talk to somebody? So I think that's, those are kind of the layers of how I'd answer the what channels to go use question. So does that help peel it back?
That's great. No, it's very helpful, very helpful. And I know even for us, and we're a small 7-person firm, and we over the last couple of months especially have started to do, we've always tracked where our leads come from, candidates as well as clients, right. But trying to do a little bit more diligence, if you will, in asking questions. So you called us because you on the website, you saw us there. Did you also see us on LinkedIn? Did you also happen to see one of our emails that got sent out? So those secondary attributes are very important, but they're harder to track. A lot of times people don't even remember where they saw. So it's one thing to ask the question, another one to actually be able to get a good solid answer. But it's a good point. And to that point, actually, so one of the other trends that we're seeing is that more companies are hiring this role, and it's been around for a while, but it's had different labels on it, of what's called sales enablement. Right. And it's somebody that sits between marketing, sales, sometimes product development, and even IT as well, that is really providing the support, the resources, the collateral, the data, right, to the marketing and sales team together, so they can more quickly, more efficiently address any questions from customers, those kinds of things, and prospects. Are you seeing the clients that you're working with, how often, I guess, is there a sales enablement person? And are you seeing that as a trend that's growing out there with your clients?
Yeah. Yes. I think that the push toward more virtual selling and digital selling, as opposed to meeting at a conference, dinner, drinks, that motion, I think has resulted in the sales team asking for more of that, right? More of that enablement, more up-to-date materials, and maybe even positioning and messaging and the verticals companies are going after have changed because of the pandemic. So it probably all needs to get refreshed in some way, right? And the stuff we have is outdated. It doesn't talk about the fact that we now spray disinfectants as well as tanning spray. I mean, who knows, right? So there's probably a reason for that uptick. And I think that's one. I think one of the functions that has been I won't say overlooked, but maybe misunderstood over time in marketing has been product marketing.
Mm.
And that is what I call the pointy end of the spear between sales, marketing, and product, right? It's usually the person that's translating what the technology does and the features into benefits. And then that becomes part of sales collateral, sales enablement. Also in sales enablement, I put sales playbooks, which is definitions of personas and problems that they are maybe encountering and how their solution is positioned to solve those things. And so I like the clarity of the term sales enablement a lot more than product marketing. I've learned over years, product marketing, people divvy up lots of different jobs and put it under that, right? And it tends to be very inconsistent. I really like what you're saying about calling it a sales enablement role, because ultimately the effectiveness of the product marketing role is, do we sell more because we're better able to articulate those things through our collateral, our website, and our playbook? So I like the word sales enablement because it shows where the tight alignment there is needed.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think, that product marketing, term that you're talking about is very traditional, right? With a lot with, J&J and Xerox and, the big companies over the last, 50 years have used product marketing, and one person or one team owns a specific product and they're in charge of just that. And I think, back in the day where every product really had its own ecosystem and there was very little cross-selling or kind of overlap, that was fine. But these days, everything overlaps. Nothing can be in a silo, even in terms of sales and marketing themselves, right? It used to be that sales and marketing were very separated, very siloed, and they would operate differently and even rarely get together, which is crazy to think about. But in today's world, that's just a recipe for doom, right? I mean, the company's not going to survive if marketing and sales are doing two different things and just blaming each other, right? So are you seeing some of that enhanced or increased collaboration between sales and marketing?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it still happens, right? Where sales and marketing are battling. And so I think creating alignment starts with incentives, starts with mutual accountability and cross-functional objectives, using corporate terms. But is your marketing team accountable for, and do they pay attention to the revenue that comes from those leads, right? The revenue, they're not dictating a sales process, but to believe that buyers, to your point, Ken, are only engaging with marketing up until this point, and then it's all sales. We know that's not true, right? We know the buyers talk to sales somewhere, and then go check out the website and read 3 things of content, and then talk to sales and sign up for a webinar and get the email every week, nurture emails every week, or the blog emails, and then call sales when they are in their budgeting season and they want to do that big project with you, right? And now it's time for a statement of work. We know it bounces back and forth. So to say that like these objectives are only in this department and these objectives are only in those only creates friction between the two of them. So yeah, I think there is much more of a recognition now that digital is more and more and more, that buyers are going between the two, and therefore the two functions need to collaborate more strongly.
Very true. One of the other things that we're doing internally, and I've been hearing this from a lot of clients also, is a little bit more of a focus on kind of customer segmentation, right? Yeah. So rather than sending one blast general email out to all the folks in your database or newsletter, whatever it might be, and having it all sound the same, instead it's, this is our list of marketing leaders. This is our list of sales leaders. Here's our list of, of buyers on the supply chain and procurement side. And each message, 80% of the message might be the same core message, but that 20% that's personalized really seems to make a difference. And it's not easy to do as a small firm like ours too. It takes a fair amount of work. We don't have the resources to use a HubSpot on a regular basis. But I'm curious, are you seeing value in segmentation, customer segmentation? Is that something that your CMOs tend to get involved with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a great question as a follow-up to the sales and marketing alignment that we just talked about.
Right, yeah.
It kind of ranges the spectrum from sort of the broad, more a newslettery or blog focused general message email, all the way over to like an account-based marketing one-to-one playbook, right? And there's a whole spectrum of ways to do this in between. lot of the companies, frankly, that we run into aren't executing even the general message at a regular frequency with interesting content. And then if they are, a lot of organizations spend money on creating blogs and content, right? So it's all about create the content that's interesting, but then look for the amplification across multiple channels. So before necessarily I'd run down a customer segmentation path, which adds exponentially, right? For each one adds more work for this one motion. I'd say, are you exploring all the other opportunities for amplification of your content first? And that those are social, those are paid social, that's paid search with a good landing page and call to action to download a pillar page or long form article. It's syndicated content. Are you paying to get it put into some magazines or publications? Are you doing some earned media? Do you have places where PR is getting you placed in certain areas? So, you know, we could make it more tailored. We could also make it just more out there because, you know, the one thing marketers always think is every email we send, everybody opens and reads it. But we all know that when we interact with our own inbox, that may not be the case. So it's okay if the same message goes out again and again. So segmentation, do all of that. And if it's now you're ready for the next step, then maybe segmentation. Now, asterisk on that, if it's a completely different persona with a completely different solution set, you know, that probably starts to warrant splitting out your communication across segments. But I'd also offer that, you know, it doesn't hurt. The marketing person will just ignore the thing in their inbox for sales, and you know what I'm saying? So they'll naturally kind of select what they want to engage with without us trying to tailor it so perfectly for them.
Right, that's true, true. And it's all about the subject lines, right? If you're getting 250 emails a day, like many of us are, you know, how do you make your message stand out? A lot of it is subject line, right? It's just, it's a big piece of it, at least what we find with our clients also.
Yeah, and I just would rather see that the motion happen and the content investment happen before, you know, making the execution 2 or 4 or 8 times more difficult. I think
right. Sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So in the last, you know, what, 5 or 10 minutes here we have here, I'm curious about, you know, kind of where you see this all going, right? And it's a very big question, I realize, but how do you see the role of marketing evolving? And, you know, fractional, but otherwise as well, just on a broader scale. Where do you see, you know, marketing going in the next couple of years, or what are you expecting out there?
Well, I mean, if this last probably 9 months is an indication, I think there's more and more demand for marketing out there. You know, just looking at some of your research reports, Ken, that you put out, which are great. They're so helpful. And then just my own experience across clients, current and former, plus the companies we're working with, there is a lot of hunt for good marketing talent. So I don't think that it's becoming less important to a company's success, right? And I think that's true for whether it's full-time or fractional agency, freelance type of talent. Organizations are looking for the right mix to take their marketing to the next level. I don't think that's going to slow down. I do think that as we become more digitally oriented, because we're selling more digitally and the tools are becoming better and more available, you know, that making sure that marketing can articulate its value. We own our own fate, right? If we can articulate, look, you know, that client last year, we spent $600,000 on marketing that I mentioned, the IT services company last year. We spent $600,000. They grew and put on new logo revenue of 3.2 million. All of the leads came digital, right, for new logos. So if you're going to get a 5x, like, you know, you're going to put more money in, right? So we own our own fate. So this year marketing we're doing some more things to expand with that organization. We own our own fate. So being able to articulate the return on investment from the spend is going to dictate kind of what we're able to do and how many cool things we're able to go play with and try and create and test. out there. So that is, I think, an increasingly important equation to figure out in your organization. And then, my hope is that marketing continues to be seen more and more as a strategic function in the organization that is about figuring out which markets to go after, which products to highlight, what trends to write content about, rather than sort of an order taking tactical execution function that just executes on what someone else is dictating. I think taking the steps to figure it out so that we can do our job as a chief investment officer, right? So we can say, I think we're better off with our returns over here and over here than there, and then executing against it and being able to measure it, if will help us keep that seat as a strategic function in the organization as opposed to sort of a tactical and operational one. And I hope that trend it continues at something that we all believe at Chief Outsiders is the approach. You've probably seen our Growth Gears book. If you haven't, I'm happy to send you a copy. Just shoot me a note. But that's what we started with when our company was born, 10 years ago, was this concept of insights drives strategy, drives execution. And so without understanding the customer, the market, the trends, the competition, it's really hard to build a marketing strategy that's going to, through its execution, return the money that we need to.
That's great. Yeah. Well, and I think, I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's, for the last, 5-10 years, marketing has always kind of struggled, if you will, and kind of strived to have that seat at the table. But as the 50-year-old joke goes, right, I know that half my marketing is working. I'm just not sure which half, right? That's the way it was forever. But I think over the last 5 years with AI and data analytics and much more effective ways to extract data and then apply trends, going forward, I think marketing truly does have a seat at the table now, right? And can really say, I can tell you, these 3 things are working very well. These 2 are kind of so-so. These other 2 things are just not working at all. Let's get rid of those. And I think that's going to help integrate marketing into the broader organization, more effectively. And also, I think bring sales and marketing together. And like you said, product, development, marketing, enablement, those will all come together as a necessity. They have to. And the companies that don't do that are the ones that are really going to suffer, going forward.
Yeah. And coming back to the fractional topic on this, I think that's why the rise of the fractional executive. It's, for marketing, it's setting up that engine for growth. It's creating the math formula and creating the capability to create content and amplify it broadly. It's setting up all of those processes. That's the why fractional, because when you've done it 20 or 30 times before, we're able to kind of navigate around the typical sort of issues. And I think that's true for any sort of function that does a process again and again and again. And same thing for fractional sales. You need a sales team that has to have a process, whatever it is for that industry, that function that's going to help make them successful. Same thing for finance and the other fractional seats, HR, hiring, talent, all of those, they're all processes. And to have the fractional leadership that's done it before come in and set it up and then find the person to lead and run it going forward is a very compelling proposition.
I agree completely. You mentioned the Growth Gears book a minute ago as well. Is there other research that Chief Outsider, puts out on a regular basis that we can access or review?
Definitely. So we do have a monthly kind of best of blog that goes out. You can follow us on LinkedIn. We share out a lot of our, all of our CMOs are writing blogs, ebooks on a variety of topics. There's a lot of rich articles on our site. We are in the process of continuing to optimize and organize it. There's a lot there. And, there are some certain verticals. We do a lot of work with private equity. So there's some PE and M&A type of research that you might find interesting. We just did our 2nd annual CMO survey. So we should be having those results in the next month or 2, where we ask our 80 CMOs about what they're seeing, a lot of the questions we covered today, and we summarize those results across our firm. So you'll get more than just my point of view. Yeah, and the best way is to either shoot me a note. I'll make sure you get signed up for those on an ongoing basis, or to follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter. Those are probably the best 2 channels.
Great. Perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, good. Well, thank you. I mean, this has been, I could ask you another 15 questions if we had the time, but this has been, great in terms of just insight and getting a sense for how you operate and that collaboration we talked about. And just, there's so many trends out there happening. It's really helpful to hear, directly from you about what you're seeing. So thank you. Thank you for being part of the conversation this morning and for making yourself available also. And for everybody else out there, as Sharon mentioned, she's happy to connect with you. And if you want to reach out to her directly, feel free. You want to reach out to myself as well. Either way, it's fine. And we'll get you the research and information that you need also. But she is readily available. So thank you very much for that. It's been a great conversation this morning. So we'll see you all back here next month. Also, we again have Cliff, who's the CEO of Conduent, speaking. If you have questions between now and then about the group, let me know, and we'd be happy to help out. And you'll be getting a follow-up email later on today as well with the audio version of this being available electronically. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks so much.